Are we live? Are we live? Welcome
I
to the
see it.
IDW CleanRoom, controlled environment for uncontrolled conversation. And today we're going to talk about what was supposed to be a post. Uh, oh shit, I have it on my phone. My bad. Uh, so today we are going to talk about. We're supposed to talk about post-election, but yeah, you know, election's not really post, although it kind of is. I mean, we know the results.
Yeah. I think we see where it's going, but well, I mean, by this point last year, we already knew that Trump had won.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
True.
and so that we don't is a big difference, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, people called it 11-9 at like some traumatic event, right? And that was, technically the election was the 8th, but it's because it was like 2 a.m., right, that it was announced. But here we are. It's Friday now. The election was Tuesday. We still don't know. It's still too close to call. There's mail-in ballots that need to be counted, and there's probably going to be a couple recounts here and there in some areas. So we're gonna have to see how that pans out. But I mean, honestly, just if the progress of the votes being tallied is at what it is, it looks like Biden has defeated Trump.
Yep. Um, it sure does. I mean, assuming the election is above board, then yeah, Biden won. Biden won fair and square. Oh, and
Yeah.
also we have a little rule. I'm gonna put it up. Hold on. We're going to do 2 hours because the idea here is to keep it brief, and in case it gets heated, we have a point to stop. Um, but also we're gonna do a 2 hours tomorrow so that European people can participate and so that people can cool down a little bit and come back, revisit it from a calmer perspective. So I'm gonna put 2 hours up. Um, I guess I'll get right into it as I start with my opinions. Oh, what do you mean? Oh, why is that not working?
Because you're not paying it a living wage. That's why.
Oh, it's because I didn't do. Jesus. There we go.
There you go. There's a timer.
Yeah, but I'm gonna move it up to the middle.
And that way people can see mine. Yeah, my good.
Your swollenness.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I think my yoga is paying off.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I look leaner. I feel leaner.
All right. So here's what I'm gonna say about the election. Um, everything's fine right now, but if you are going to act like people are just going to accept these results, I think you're crazy. It's pretty obvious
I
that
think you're right.
it's pretty obvious that people are not going to accept the results, and it's pretty obvious why they're concerned about it. I think they've been lied to for 4 years. A lot of things have come out. If I knew that people were calling my guy Hitler, um, like literally Hitler, I would say, well, you would do anything to stop him from winning. Again, I don't believe that. I don't believe that that's what's happening, but I do think if the response to the concern is not, you know what? You don't trust us for perfectly understandable reasons, and we really should have regained your trust for this specific situation. Um, since we haven't, we're going to take our time. We got a month before the Electoral College makes their votes, right? I think that's right.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to spend that month making sure you feel like this election is above board. Every question is going to be like I'm tired. I'm tired of hearing there's no evidence of foul play. It's like, well, no. The point is we wouldn't have evidence if there was foul play because we don't trust the information sources who would tell us if something had gone wrong. Right? That's
Mm-hmm.
legitimate. As much as I don't think anything has gone wrong, I understand the concern.
Mm-hmm. I understand that as well. I think one of the more concerning things is, though, that some people might take evidence of legal election work as evidence of actual fraud because, well, the issue is that there's been some of that footage floating around of like of folks going through ballots, and from what I understand, they're like darkening things that were already filled out by the voter, and making sure that they're legible if it's going to be run through the machine. And this is all like on the official like public camera that's like screening everything the election workers do in that jurisdiction. And people think that this is evidence of the voter fraud, and it's just people making sure the ballots are actually going to be read correctly. Like it's just trying to make sure a legitimate ballot isn't in sort of a hanging chat scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me like they're just doing this for every ballot, and whatever the votes are, and it's all on tape so that if there's meddling with it, it can be found. And then there are supervisors there. Now these are the tools we have to make sure that the elections are done fairly and freely and legally.
Mm-hmm.
And people are seeing this footage and saying like, "Aha, this is the voter fraud." And I'm like, if the proof of like a legitimately run election is going to trigger accusations of voter fraud, that is deeply concerning.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I think that's something that could trigger some kind of escalated response by people who don't want to accept the election. And you've seen a lot of discussion like that online lately. The new hub for the Donald has been talking about that, about potentially rising up or defending the Constitution. And these people
That's
they're
concerning.
so angry and defensive, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And the people who are so um, mistrusting, I guess, of major information sources aren't um, seeing just reality for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that is, I think, being exposed in this moment. I don't know how it would have run if the votes seemed to be leaning the other way, and how people on the left would be reacting. But with the situation we have right now, um, that's what we're saying. And I think this is something that isn't necessarily new with a lot of the more far right or very strong Trump supporters. And it's probably not something that will go away, where you can show something plain as day to them that a situation isn't what it seems to be, and they take it as proof of the opposite. And that could be, if that becomes a trend, outside of the context of this election, um, it could make things. We could have more of those things that push us toward some kind of constitutional crisis or something.
Mm-hmm. I guess I do think that there. So if you go and have work done on your car, you basically assume that the mechanic knows what they're talking about, right? When they tell you, okay, but
Right.
so I feel like the analogy here would be every time I've gone to I've had to go to a mechanic a lot over the past, 30 years. And it seems to me that in the last 4 to 10 years, the mechanic has been lying to me. So when they tell me something's wrong with my car and it's dangerous to put it on the road, I think they're just trying to fuck with me. I think they're just trying to
If that
get as
was
much money
true,
out of me as
like, would
possible.
your vehicle not pass inspection then?
Yeah. But
Right?
that's
Because they're not going to put them on the inspection. Because if they're lying on inspections, they're going to draw the attention of the state. Then, right?
yeah, that's
Oh,
a good
you want to get
analogy,
this
but
fixed?
even there, like I think, and again, I don't feel this way. I think there's nothing that seems wrong with this election. If anything, I'm hoping later I can talk about why I think these results are ideal in a way that I could not have hoped for. I didn't even think of this option of the way it's gone. But like even in that scenario, I feel like a lot of these people feel as though like so that they feel as though even that system has been corrupted. When when you hear about uh the spying on the Trump administration, or the weird shit that happened when Trump came into office, right? And you start I can understand why you'd start to think they're just going to do anything to get rid of this guy. They're going to do anything. And it's really hard to fight conspiracy theory, because the more you act as though it's too ridiculous to consider, the more it feels likely that it's true.
to
Oh yeah,
that
yeah. Well,
point,
no, I
I
mean,
would.
this is what I see every day at my job. There's a similar metaphor to your mechanic, and that's like if you need a lawyer. I mean, if you have a court date and you need a lawyer, like obviously it's like the person who will know what you can or can't do in your situation would be a lawyer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, at my job, folks call us about their traffic citations because we do traffic law, and they ask us what's possible, right? And then we tell them we give them very straight answers for their questions, but sometimes just the way the law is written, like we have nothing but bad news for these people.
Yeah.
Even doing a good job is nothing but bad news, and
Mm-hmm.
so the bad news to them is somehow a signal of we're up to something, right? And this is some of the irony of is that a lot of people distrust lawyers, right? They think lawyers are all sleazy and going to trick them and cheat them out of their money. Um, and the ironic thing is that if you trigger that instinct in them when you're honest and straightforward about what's actually possible and available to them through the justice system.
Hmm.
The people they go to, the people who snipe some of our clients sometimes are the sleazy lawyers who dangle opportunities in front of them at a much lower price for representation as well. Um, it's like we get folks who call us and they're like, and we'll tell them, our attorney thinks it can be reduced to, um, a lower speeding charge at best because of how high it is. That the court won't do any better than that, right? They have a policy. And they're like, well, I talked to somebody who said they could get it dismissed. Okay, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, and they're trying to get us to like betray the the information from our own attorneys to win them over. Like, and these are the people who have the trust issues doing this, right?
Yeah.
And they're actively incentivizing this to be distrustful. And there's a distrust against certain things, like basically institutions, basically against expertise. And I suspect it's a similar instinct as what people are feeling in regards to Trump. How there's been a lot of it, like and there are sleazy lawyers, there are dirtbag lawyers, and it just takes that one dirtbag lawyer who screwed you over to completely poison your attitude about them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we see with like the mainstream media, the way it's been, especially the last 4 years in response to Trump, it's been increasingly distrustful, right? The problem is though that if you give people a very truthful and very transparent um, reckoning of news that they don't like, it can trigger that response to them. I suspect that's sort of what's happening with this election here. Again, going back to the point about how the proof of a legitimately run election is the thing that alarms people, right? Like that is what's setting a lot of people off right now, and it could
Yeah,
be
yeah,
the thing.
yeah. I mean, I think for me to go back to the mechanic analogy for a minute, unfortunately, it's going to take way longer to do the work this time because you've lost my trust. So everything you do, I'm going to need an
Mhm,
explanation for. Cyborg, what were you going to say?
mhm.
Oh, I was gonna say the same way that you're thinking that, the left would do anything to stop Hitler. I think a lot of people on the left are thinking Trump would do anything to win. And that's the hard part, right? It's like everyone, no one's doing this based on reality. It's all about how do I shift this to my team coming out ahead, and I
True.
will do everything I can to disbelieve the other
Hmm.
to make that happen. So it's really lost its basis in reality, and it's just about like we don't trust the other people, and so we
Yeah,
don't trust anybody in the system that we can't see active.
This is
yeah.
to
Because if
to
you
me
look at,
this
like, for
is
example, yeah,
just this is why I think we have like why the press is protected under the Constitution, because with the assumption was that you could trust the press, right? You need some sort of information system that is reliable, that does two things: is accountable to the people and asks the questions that people don't know they need to ask of the state, but also reports back on what the state is doing. And now it feels like, well, it's like there isn't one press. There's 1,000 partisan press, and none of them seem to be like I don't trust them. I personally don't trust them. I trust the election not because of the press, but because I don't see anything that sets alarm bells off for me. But that's concerning because I'm by no means an expert.
Right, and I think that's people. That's the thing people are seeing on the right is like there has been dishonesty in like in mainstream media, in academia, with a lot of woke companies as well, and so they're expecting another institution like this to engage in distrustful behavior, and they may latch on to any kind of evidence, even evidence that is in fact evidence to the contrary, to confirm that concern of theirs. You know, that's the concern on the right. I think to Cyborg's point about how people on the left are concerned about that on the right. You know, there's a similar narrative in their head, right? They're aware of over the last decade the you know the record precision in gerrymandering that was mostly determined by the red wave of the 2010 election.
Mm-hmm.
Coupled with things like photo ID laws in certain states, particularly rather often swing states, various other things meant to minimize voter turnout. Um, and then you pair all that with the fact that um, Ruth Bader Ginsburg just died, and the Republicans were very quick to make sure that they got a sixth Republican justice on there. And to a Democrat, that looks like if any of this is going to be challenged in the court, and in case John Roberts does that thing he does, where he'll side with the Democratic delegation in the court, there's a backup conservative in case he gets cold feet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of Democrats are thinking like they timed it perfectly. Some people might have been wondering that they have RBG killed so that they could make sure they had a strong majority on the court. Some people might be thinking that. No, I don't think that. But there's half the country of 300 million out there wondering all sorts of things. And if this thing does go to the Supreme Court, right, there's a good chance it could go in Trump's favor because what they consider credible could be based on maybe similar concerns that are in their head, right? I would hold off on impugning the motives of these conservative justices, but what's convincing to them may not be convincing to Democrats. Hence why people feel like your party is relevant in the Supreme Court justice appointment process. And when we saw what happened with Bush versus Gore in 2000, when there was a similar dispute over the Florida ballots, right? The justices really broke along party lines in deciding that one. And so that was a less partisan environment even then. I mean, consider how more partisan we are 20 years later. Democrats are terribly afraid of the Supreme Court having a say in this. And so each side has like their own story for how the other one's going to steal the election. And it may not be based on good evidence or any evidence at all, but it is fanning the flames. And there's a lot of people. I mean, we've seen those memes go around of like people like watching the election results, and they're like sitting on their couch with like a ski mask and an assault vest and a rifle, like ready to go out and like take part in a civil war in the streets, depending on which side is declared the winner or loser. I mean, and I'm really hoping it doesn't get to that, but this is more likely as a reaction to an election than one we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I guess in my view, like this was inevitable. This sort of situation where people having no trust in information and living in literally different realities, which is always true to an extent, but to the degree they live in different realities now, that it would inevitably hit a point where it became dangerous. And I guess my personal opinion here is we're at that point, so let's not pretend that we can just like wait it out and say maybe now is the point where we say we have to in 1 month, we have to in 1 month get enough people in the country to trust this that we don't that we have that most people trust who the president of the United States is in January. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm part of me is concerned that that's not going to happen.
I think the only way that things really go south is if the government institutions don't kind of stand their ground based on legality, as Joe was saying. Like, I think the chaos that we might see in the coming weeks from the masses isn't going to be that severe, but I think we do see something go to the Supreme Court and we start seeing that bipartisan take place, then you're going to see a lack of trust really enter the country, and that's going to set some things off.
Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah.
actually think that like every lawsuit that Trump brings, I think that like don't. I think it would be good if the media didn't react as though it's insane, even if it is, and to instead respond with what the legal system determined based on that lawsuit and why.
I will say that Fox is I can't even believe I'm actually saying this,
That's-
but Fox News, the fact that they stood their ground on Trump, acting out of order on this is incredible and a really necessary for civility.
Yeah, Fox won the news game of this election. Like I'm shocked.
I'm
Can't
That's
surprised
believe it.
with what it's done. Yes.
that's what I was saying was I said this to I think Orisk the other day that like if I could go back in time 10 to 15 years ago and tell my younger self that Donald Trump was in his second election because he won and that the country might be in a serious problem if they can't trust the news and the last best hope in the mainstream media for the election coverage was Fox News, I would have laughed in my own face. I I can't believe that. It's genuinely shocking to me that Fox News is somehow keeping a cool head and being seemingly very honest. I
Are you
guess
guys
it's a
just
smart
going to
business
the
move.
website and looking at the website, or are you like watching particular pundits or?
I mean, I've been, you know, going to the Fox News website every once in a while, and like I never have seen anything concerning. You know, like you go to MSNBC or CNN's website, on the front page you'll find something stupid, something that like is clearly made to piss people off, to get people mad. And I didn't see any of that from Fox this election. I also think like they were some of the first to say that Trump lost in places that he should have won.
Right, which a lot of people are still upset about.
Yeah, but I mean, it seems like they were right. I think the real reason Fox has been this way is because that they know that Trump's going to lose, and they also know that people are just not going to tolerate the news anymore.
Is
And
this a way to distance themselves, do you think? I mean, what is, because it does feel like there's got to be some agenda from Fox in this, right? Like they're turning their back on Trump in a way.
I think it provides a good contrast. Like if you expect Fox News to be the one that's very partisan, hey, Dissent DJ, can you turn your mic off? Getting a lot of feedback from you. Um, if if the people who are the most worried about pro-Trump news stuff expect Fox News to be the biggest problem there, and they're not, while at it creates a weird situation where it's like, well, they didn't do the bad thing that I thought they were going to do, but my news doesn't seem to be very, calm. I mean, I don't know. I feel like Fox News took a good bet that people are going to really want calm, reasonable, honest responses. And
In in all fairness to Fox News, they've actually been like this for quite a while. Um, because I would go to foxnews.com every now and then just to see what they're saying, and they kind of just say what people say. Like they'll have a quote from Trump, like, "Oh, Trump said such and such," and then you could. I would always compare that to CNN or NPR or whomever. Like Trump erroneously said such and such, and Fox has never done that. Um, I actually think they've always been pretty fair. They might not be fair, maybe necessarily in their coverage. Like they might cover things that make Democrats look bad, um, and not Republicans, but they don't they don't spin the story itself. I've noticed.
hmm, that was not
So
true when I was younger.
yeah,
Yeah, that was not true when I was younger.
Just to chime in real quick, Fox News probably doesn't. I mean, if Trump says something that is erroneous, that means it's not true or it's a lie, and so Fox News not calling it out as that is like support, like making it okay that Trump is lying.
Erroneous is just one word I used. I'm just talking about adjectives in general, because there are a lot of times where like NPR and CNN will inject adjectives into something Trump says when it's not even like a proper descriptor, and they're just clearly trying to uh, try to frame the story in a very specific way. Um, but like, let's say hypothetically, Trump did lie. I've noticed when looking at Fox News stories, they'll say like Trump says such and such, like, but this other person doesn't agree with that and says no, that's a lie because such and such. They actually generally give like two sides of the story, and then just kind of leave it at that.
Hmm. Hmm. All right, I'm going to share why I'm happy with the results of this election, even though I wanted Trump to win. And it basically is because the clear loser of this election is woke leftists. Like, they are the clear loser. There's like Trump lost, but he didn't lose that bad. The Republicans didn't lose that bad. The Democrats didn't lose that bad or win that big. But the woke people totally lost yesterday or Tuesday.
How,
What a week.
how did woke people lose?
Well, the Trump swung every demographic except white men. Biden only swung white men as compared to Hillary. And this is in an election with unprecedented turnout for people who are living today. The last time that there was this turnout was 1900. So, in an election where more people voted, minorities did not vote as a monolith. A bunch of them actually voted for Trump. Especially, I think it was like Latinos. And I just think like it destroys this weird narrative that Trump is the white people's president, or it doesn't hold water to make claims that far leftists make about Trump or about the Republicans or about any of that.
Right. And there's also the fact that I think it used to be the case, like you could pretty much guarantee that if turnout was high, the Democrats would do better. And yeah, Biden won, but um, he just won the presidential race, right? Democrats lost some seats in the House, not much, but they lost some, and the Republicans seem to have kept the Senate. I mean, we'll see the full results because the same states that we don't know if Trump or Biden won are also the same states where we don't know which senator or Senate candidate rather won. But it is looking like the Republicans managed to maintain the Senate, and the fact that the Republicans got anything out of this, plus the demographic data we have that Jimmy pointed out, indicates something about the woke left that it didn't get out of this. I think the only thing it got out of it was that Biden felt pressured to have a black female vice presidential candidate, and made that choice, even though Kamala Harris wasn't particularly liked or popular in the primary herself. Right. The fact that um, her background could be a selling point just on that alone is maybe indicative of that. But that's about it.
I feel like in light of the results of the election, Biden saying he was going to pick a woman of color just comes off as kind of not great.
It clearly didn't pay off. It clearly did not have the payoff that they thought it would. And that's about all you can really do with the vice presidential pick. Effectively, you never pick a vice presidential candidate under the assumption that, oh wow, I think they'd be the best vice president we could have right now. They're always about winning those states that you really want to win. And they
Who's
were
she gonna
trying
win?
to get yeah, they were trying like, oh, we want to get the black vote up in places like Detroit and stuff so that Michigan doesn't slip through our fingers again. The fact is, Kamala Harris is no friend to the people of Detroit or Michigan or the other Rust Belt states or any working class demographic, whether they're of color or whether they're considered white. And a lot of people, I think, saw through that. And that is indicative of why Trump's numbers with these other demographics, these non white male demographics, were better statistically. I mean, he still, for the most part, lost those same non-white male demographics, but he made really obvious gains compared to what Hillary Clinton had in 2016. And you can't look away from that. If you're a political strategist, you cannot look away with that. Trump ate into what is considered the bread and butter of the Democratic coalition, and Biden managed to clinch this one only because enough of white men decided they hated Trump. And some of those white men that voted for Trump might well be Republicans who are like, I'm sick of what he's done to our party. And now that Trump's gone, who knows if they'll come back to the Democratic Party. And so the Democratic Party has its work ahead of itself. And I hope they take a lesson that trying a dose of wokeness in the ticket did not give them the rewards they wanted.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that
I guess
sorry, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say it's interesting that we're talking about the failures of. I think there's a disconnect between the Democratic Party as a whole, which is, pretty centrist and doesn't actually hold many of the far left views. Like, Joe Biden is not going to give us free healthcare for all or free education for all, things that like the far left wants. And I think the far left is even still, or like, the anti-war movement, stop supporting Israel. These are far left movements that aren't part of the woke left. With all that being said, that's one argument. That's one thing I want to point out. But like another thing is that the Democrats still won like 4 million more votes than Donald Trump and the Republicans, and it's only because we have this handicapped, broken system of the Electoral College that the race was even competitive. Like, if we simply had a popular vote, then it would have been over days ago, and
Yeah, but
Biden would clearly be the winner.
But if we had popular vote, then why do you care? Like the flyover states don't matter.
That's actually no. I strongly disagree. If you have a popular vote, every American matters, and each party has to try to win over every American's vote. It actually liberates all of us.
But you're acting so. But if you look at the map of the United States based just on county, blue is urban, by far, and red is rural, by far. But the numbers don't match. They don't have the same life. They don't have the same needs or the same wants. So if you're going to have something that allows a lower population to have a voice, because it's a big part of the country. I mean, unless you want the urban centers to decide everything about the country, I don't know how you get rid of the Electoral College completely.
I simply want the majority rule. I don't think minority rule is the best rule of a country.
Isn't the Electoral College kind of a woke thing?
No, they hate the Electoral College.
If you went with majority and popular vote, it would be susceptible to mob rule, and that's the reason why the Electoral College exists. It's to give power to the minorities. And politics is local, so one state is going to vote more for one side than the other. The Electoral College exists purely to stop tyranny, and that's the reason why the Constitution exists. It was during a time when tyranny was very real.
So I generally support the Electoral College, but recently I've had some ideas pop up that I thought were interesting. One, I actually just found out yesterday that Andrew Jackson wanted to abolish the Electoral College too. And so I'd like to look into that more. Joe probably knows more about that.
I can tell you why. He lost the election of 1824 despite blowing out the popular vote with 40%. Where it was like this was like a four-way race. So he had 40% in a four-way race. That's really good. And then the Electoral College came to a standstill, so the House of Representatives had to do it. And then John Quincy Adams, who of course had connections because his father, John Adams, had been president, got the House to back him up. And Jackson hated it. His voters hated it. Jackson was also...
and then he won in a landslide in 20.
He also helped facilitate the transition from the property owning requirement in voting to just going to white males. So if you're talking about like the first wave of expanding suffrage in America, it actually was associated with Andrew Jackson. I don't think there's anything else good that could really be said about Andrew Jackson except that.
Tell me,
he survived an assassination attempt. That's pretty cool.
Tell me if I'm wrong about this.
There were other things.
Like every state can adjust how they use their Electoral College votes, right? So like,
yes.
I mean, I live in New York State. My vote does not matter because I do not live in New York City. It just doesn't matter. So in a way,
that could be an argument for the popular vote.
Yeah, right. It is a vote. It is an argument for the popular vote. But like, one thing that serves me personally without giving up to me what is very important about the Electoral College is what if they had it so that New York decided, well, similar to at the federal level, what we're going to do is give each district one vote minimum or two or whatever, and then distribute the rest based on population. So New York City would still get the vast majority, but at least the rest of the state could have some reach to some of the Electoral College votes. There are things that could be done, but I agree that it's much better done at the state level than at the federal level. Just popular vote, I think, is just a really bad idea.
It can't happen at the state level though, because the Supreme Court ruled against that.
Really?
Yeah. So it was sort of part of the era when the Supreme Court was making a lot of decisions regarding like the civil rights era, and all the major decisions they made in that period. I forget the name of it, but basically they decided that one person, one vote is the law of the land, and so any state electoral system that doesn't abide by that is considered unconstitutional. So state legislative districts, and they used to be set up in a way where it could be an arbitrary district, but you had situations like in Alabama where like someone was from a district of 150 people with a vote in the state legislature, and then the African Americans had a district with like 100,000 people with one vote in the state legislature. And to end that, the court said state legislative districts have to be equivalent, and there's like I think like a 5% margin of error they're allowed to have based on what the limitations of districting are. So that's something that couldn't be done unless the Supreme Court made a basically revised one of its previous decisions about 50 years ago.
I mean,
Is there something?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask: is there something to be said for how the Electoral College incentivizes or prioritizes certain states over other places? Like the fact that you see more attention paid to certain states kind of shows a inequity.
I think Cyborg's actually right. I think realistically, while the Electoral College tries to give greater voice to a state that might otherwise unfairly be disadvantaged, with the way the country has since grown, with the way the partisan dust has settled, it has caused, for the most part, the battleground states to get the most attention. And also, it has incentivized, I think, ungenerous governance for the states on the losing side. So it's basically if you're a red state, if you lose, the blue coalition is not going to do anything for you. If you're a blue state, the red coalition is not going to do anything for you. And I think with the popular vote, where every vote everywhere matters, that's not as much of a problem.
Right, and also to consider, if we went with a popular vote, the Republicans would, with their current policies, never win another election. Like, just think about that for a second. They've lost
that's why it's a
seven
bad
out of the
idea. That's exactly why it's a
no,
terrible
it's a good
idea.
No, it means that their policies aren't, like, the people don't actually want them if they can't win an election based on those policies.
How many
They've lost
millions
7
of
out of the
people?
past 8 elections.
Oh my God!
The
You're
Republicans have
literally
lost 7 out of the past 8 elections
you are literally
of the popular
asking for the
vote.
tyranny of the majority. You don't want there to be.
Of course.
That's crazy.
I want
to
the
me.
majority to decide things. Why would I want the tyranny of the minority?
Wait. So here's my point. No matter what you do, there is preferential treatment. There is going to be centers where people put their attention, right? No matter what. If it's popular vote, it's going to be New York City. It's going to be big cities. That's like you're going to go to the major centers of population. And you're going to try to get them, right? That's your argument. So my argument
is that's where people choose to live. Why is that not valid choice?
Because it only because what people vote very much based on their lifestyle. It's not fair to the people who don't live those lives. The needs of somebody who lives in New York City are nothing like the needs of somebody who lives in rural Pennsylvania. It's just not the same.
That's not my argument.
Wait. So let me finish my point. Under popular vote, there's unfair advantage. Like all of the attention goes to the urban centers. Under electoral college vote, all of the attention goes to states that have a disagreement. To me, that's way superior. That's way better. It's way better to focus where I have to get people where there's a reasonably similar disagreement, because that kind of translates to the rest of the country.
But I disagree that it centers on urban. The popular vote would center on urban areas. It simply centers around the most amount of people. Like an urban person's vote under a popular vote would be equal to a rural person's vote, and right now they're not. So all I'm promoting is equality of people in the country.
The key way to look at it is the fact that politics is local, and you're more bound to have the same politics as the people who you live around.
Yeah.
And there's going to be less people on the rural areas, but they need to be also represented as equally as people who live in the urban areas. So it's not just, each individual needs to be represented. It's the fact that communities need to be represented.
But if you have 80% of a country living a certain lifestyle, why is it that you don't get their voice to carry 80% weight? Like, it doesn't make sense to me that you would negate the choice of culture or a country and deny the trends just because you less voices to have more power technically.
And I have another question about this is the thing that always confuses me about when people talk about tyranny of the majority, and I don't think that's like an irrelevant concern, but with the way our system is written, manifested in the Electoral College as well as the Senate, what we rather often get, as opposed to tyranny of the majority, is tyranny of the minority, where a minority of the country gets to dictate the rules against the wishes of a majority of the country that thinks otherwise. That is just part of American history. I mean, and
I think we've had
we've
both.
seen it much. Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, like, we seem like much more content to err on the side of tyranny of the minority to stop tyranny of the majority. And I would think if we're going to make a mistake,
I don't
I
think
would
that's
prefer
true.
tyranny of the majority.
I don't think that's true.
Like,
I think the past history of who's been president and who's dominated Congress it says the opposite of that. That it's pretty relatively equal, and then it ebbs and flows. It doesn't
I mean, I think
seem
where we
true
are
that
currently, we're seeing a lot of gridlock, particularly in the Senate, and the Senate has majority control from seems to be strictly a minority coalition of voters.
Mhm.
Right, and
Okay,
that
I can give you an example of why I will never I will never be okay with this, and I actually think the country will go to war over this because okay, the perfect example is, so I live in an area that has urban and rural areas, and people who live in rural areas have way more, like, they tend to have weapons, they tend to have things that other people don't. And I remember going to a sort of town hall meeting for a district that is both. And the fucking woman running it lives in an urban center, and somebody said, "Okay, what's the response time for the police or the ambulance in where you live?" And she didn't know. And he goes, "It's like under 5 minutes. It's nothing." Do you know what the response time is where I live? It's 15 fucking minutes. My wife is dying, or if somebody's in my house, I can't rely on the police. She said, "Then move to a city." And it was just like, you know what? You can fuck right off. You can fuck right off. And
But isn't that logistical? That's just logistics, though. I mean,
it
that's
is
just
logistics.
basic, like,
It is logistics. But you
but
have
Jimmy,
to be
like,
able to represent yourself.
but I think we should all be careful in our daily lives to not write off an entire movement because of what one person said to us. Like, you came across a human being that said something shitty, but the
No, but that's
argument for a
behind
popular vote can
everything.
still be
Like the
valid.
reason I'm so
I've
irritated
heard
is
that
because
same
it's behind
thing.
everything you're saying. You're saying
But
that the
I've heard
majority
that
should
same
just
argument.
win always. That's what you're saying. That the
I
majority.
mean, I
in a
do think a majority
democracy?
rule makes more sense than a minority rule all the time. Like the Senate,
I
the Senate
think
Republicans
I think the
they
fact that
control,
we have
they
a
represent.
system that does both is way better than either. I think the fact that we have.
I don't think it does both. I think that to me, it looks like we get the minority rule most of the time. I mean, the minorities control the Supreme Court. The minorities control the Senate. That for the
Right
past
think
40
now-
that's
years,
very
they've
important
controlled
though.
the
So
presidency.
because the
Right.
minorities, okay, if you have power over time, you're going to get more power and you will become the majority. And I think that's critical because it's a back and forth, tug of
Could I
war.
pose a question to you, Jimmy?
Mhm.
All right. So now, what you said, I think, is actually what she said to you. Like, you should move to a city. And she said that to you, right?
No, she said it to that person, and he just left.
Oh, to that person. Okay.
He just left, and I was like, "You
Okay,
should have
so what
fucking
she said
punched
to
her
that
in the
guy-
face or something." Christ, I was pissed.
I think that's a shitty thing to say, but that is a point I've heard made almost without fail by folks who defend the federation that we have. And just a quick aside, because this was discussed in the server last night, is some people are saying, like, is this a matter of democracy versus a republic? And the electoral college is what makes us a republic, and it's not what makes us a republic. It's part of what makes us a federation. Like, lots of countries are republics that don't have something like an electoral college. But it is what makes us a federation, right? It's a nation of smaller, like, mini nations in a sense. And so what I've heard people say is, like, usually when they're talking in a very pro federation sense of running this 50 state project, is that they think, of course, it's important for states to have certain rights, either in how they're represented or what they get to say for themselves over the national government. And so I've often said, there are limits on that, where if, for example, because this was not long ago, in Georgia and Texas up till 2003, sodomy was a criminal offense. People were getting locked up for this. People were being taken out of their homes and arrested and imprisoned for this, because there was a theocratic element to the dominant voting blocks of both Texas and Georgia. The Supreme Court threw those laws out and said they were unconstitutional, right? And if we had too weak of a federal government, right? If the federation leaned too much toward what states are allowed to do, we still have laws like that, like quite draconian laws. A tyranny at a more local level. And what I've rather often heard, without fail, from folks who defend that system is, well, you should just move to a different state if you don't like that law. And I always think, well, what a shitty thing to say. Like,
I agree.
Like, I've heard self-described libertarians say this, that they are okay with a brutal anti-sodomy law where you go to prison for something like this, and they're okay with it because a state government does it. But if the federal government did it, it's suddenly unconscionable. And I would say, like, the blade cuts both ways on this. And there's, like, that is very often the reason that we have something like an electoral college or a senate, or we kick things to the state level rather than potentially solve it better at the federal level. And so I think that's something that's worth working out when we're thinking about, like, where people live. Is the federation as a system necessarily the best for that? Because if where you live means you're a loser, that's not a great system.
That's why I like the electoral college, and it might be needed for some sort of reform. But we just had a census this year, so it's going to change. Almost definitely in 2024, it's going to be different. The votes are, like, the whole map might be different. I mean, probably California is losing a lot of votes, so who knows what's going to happen. But somebody in the comments said this. I think this is useful. They said this is Andrew Yang's position on the electoral college versus popular vote debate. He said, the electoral college is an important system that ensures the will of the larger, more populous areas of the country aren't the only focus of nationwide elections. It also is enshrined in the Constitution. Calls to change the electoral college after popular vote /win/electoral college loss can seem like sour grapes, and the attempt to abolish it would require a constitutional amendment that could be stopped by 13 states, which I think is good, and it would be. I think it would be stopped. Like, it would. There's no way that's happening, but I do think, like, I do think there's probably reform that could happen, but absolute popular vote is just never going to happen in this country, and it shouldn't.
That's not true, actually.
For changing the system, the states that would lose would just stop the amendment from being put in the Constitution.
Yeah,
we don't need a.
Which is why I don't agree with it, but I'm not about to campaign to get rid of it, because I realize it's just dead in the water.
We don't need an amendment, though. So there's this interstate popular vote pact agreement where states that if their electoral votes equal 270, if they join the pact, then they all agree to give their electoral college votes to the winner of the popular vote, regardless of who won their state vote.
Yeah, I know. I heard this, but it's basically popular
vote. Once enough states do that, but yeah, exactly. So my point is just that, like, you don't need an amendment. There's a workaround that, and currently they're up to 196 votes, because I think Colorado just joined on Tuesday.
So you're using tyranny of the majority to ensure tyranny of the majority through a loophole. I mean, good luck to
I
you.
think it's good if
Are
the
you gonna
majority
get
of a
rid of the Senate
nation rules
next?
for
Are you gonna get rid of
itself.
the Senate
Yeah,
next?
I would love to get
You're
rid
a
of the
fucking
Senate.
idiot,
Yeah.
man. You're a fucking moron.
Whoa, dude.
That's so stupid. Like that's
Jimmy,
beyond.
come on, inappropriate, man.
Come on, Jimmy.
I'm just like, that's absurd. You're gonna get rid of the Senate, and you're gonna fundamentally change the way we elect the president so that your ideology will win. Because to you, anything that ensures that Republicans can't win is a good thing.
I didn't say any of that. So I would do support getting rid of the Senate. And again, like the popular vote, this allows politicians to have to work for every American in this country, regardless of their ideology. I don't care if they believe the same thing as me. I want an equality of votes. And I do think it would benefit this country not to be ruled by, Mitch McConnell, for example, doesn't allow tons of bills to hit the Senate floor for the Senate even to vote on them. Like, we're facing a climate change disaster. The House has passed bills that would address that, and the Senate won't even let it hit the floor. And that to me signifies a broken system and a rule by minority that's detrimental to the human species.
I
Yeah, I think you managed to
understand the
get covered,
concerns.
Jimmy.
I understand the concerns, and I understand the criticisms of Mitch McConnell, and I understand why you want to pass things quickly. But I think your desire to make drastic changes without really any thought to the consequences of those changes is far worse than what you're worried about happening.
I disagree. I've thought about this a lot, and I'm not sure what consequences you're referring to.
War. I mean, I'm telling you, your country will go to war. There's no question in my mind about that. The second that happens, half the country, all of the people who voted for Trump, are going to pick up their guns, which they have more of, and they don't care if you have control of the military. They don't care, and you're going to be at war. That's what's going to happen.
So we shouldn't do something because someone else threatens us with violence.
No, we shouldn't do it because it doesn't.
That's what you're saying.
No.
That's literally what you just said. Like, we shouldn't get rid of the Senate because otherwise people will hurt us. They will shoot us. They will harm us with physical violence. And I strongly disagree. I don't think we should be like threatened by terrorists so that we should not do something that could benefit us.
So
like you just threatened me and other people with violence if we try to do something.
Okay, I should say they'll secede. They'll secede. They'll leave the country.
Yeah, they will. Then
we'll go to war because you're not going to let that happen.
You gotta be able to represent the minority and not just the majority. That's the amazing thing about the way it's written and is made, because it allows for the people who wouldn't be represented by the majority to be represented.
The reason I'm mad is because I've never talked to you and you showed up out of nowhere throwing, like, it's just annoying to me.
We did talk like a couple months ago. I joined with Cyborg Mystic.
Yeah, he's been pretty respectful too, man.
I'm sorry. I apologize for being disrespectful. I just like that it sounds, everything you're saying sounds to me like whatever gets my side to win. Since I'm the majority, I'm definitely right. I have the moral high ground. So,
all right, Jimmy, for a moment, let's just try and steelman his position, because there's potential for what you just said exactly. And I know for a fact, just from people that I know in the Democratic Party, that they would specifically want to get rid of the Senate, or as we understand the Senate, or the Electoral College as we understand the Electoral College, to stick it to the Republicans. But I'll look at it this way, right? I think dissent made a good general observation that there's an effect that, given just the rigid structure that our federation can have, going by the fixed state lines, and not taking into account like how much of the country they're actually representing, it insulates a lot of our leaders from the political process, from the democratic process, and makes them non-responsive to the needs of their people. And I think we see that, for example, in the Senate. And I do think it has made the Republican Party worse than it could be. I think there's such a thing as good conservatism. I don't think the Republican Party is the party of that. And then when you have a bad Republican Party, that makes it very tempting for the Democrats to become a bad Democratic Party. And I have seen them get worse and worse, and I've become more ashamed of my own party, largely, as I can tell, in response to what they're perceiving in the Republican Party. And I think
from the Republican Party, it's the opposite. It feels like they're responding to a bad Democratic Party. Everybody feels like the other side is being bad, and so they're being bad in response to it.
When there's like these things that make it so like you can't kick out a certain coalition, no matter how bad they are. That I think makes it so that the Federation causes sections of it to turn against each other. I think that's what we're looking at, and a good way to avoid that would be to make the state borders not as relevant in certain areas in how we decide our governance. And we could get a better Republican Party. Like, let's imagine you're someone like me who, yeah, I'm a Democrat, but I would love to see a better Republican Party. I would love to be challenged to have an actual viable alternative to the Democratic Party, because I know the Democratic Party is very imperfect. And I know that there are things conservatism has to offer. I told you the things I like about conservatives, right? Um, I think I was telling you recently, like, if I needed a favor done, I'd rather ask a conservative friend of mine than a liberal friend of mine, because I'm much more likely to conclude that the conservative friend won't flake out on me when I need them.
Hmm. I'm not a conservative either. Like, I'm not a
yeah.
Republican.
Yeah, but it's like, I think that everything that I find redeeming in conservatism isn't really represented in the Republican Party. And I think a big part of that is because they are insulated from pressure to be better. The way the system is set up, the system that is trying to, guarantee a certain amount of power to the flyover states is also guaranteeing a certain amount of power to people who have no incentive to improve their behavior and be real leaders for this country and to play games in Washington, D.C. And
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
not a.
changing the system to make it more fluid, to make it so that there's no area of the country that you can game and cynically just hold on to, like, like a fort on a board game.
I just don't see any way out of that. To me, that's what politics is. Like, I don't see how you don't end up with that no matter what you do.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know politics honestly well enough to speak to potential vicious spiral of power that could happen if you had a one vote system where it's just majority rule. But what I will say, I think, to Vincent's point, that I'm perceiving, and maybe he can speak to this more, is that if you had a party that was losing consistently by 3 to 4 million, and you were doing a majority rule election, that the party that's losing would have to become more engendered, I guess, or they would have to do more work for that losing group to actually get those votes. And so you would actually get a better country because the Republican Party would actually have to fight for those extra 4,000 or 4 million votes rather than just placate the states they're used to holding on to.
Exactly, and to build on what Cyborg and Joe just said, I think I liked both Cyborg and I think Joe, you made a lot of good points too. Like, to build on those 2 points, like, if it was a popular vote and the Republican Party was losing by 4 million in the past, like 7 out of the past 8 elections, then they would have to change their policies to better represent people. Like Joe said, they would have to become a better representation of true conservatism, and that would be better for our country. And if they had to do that, then the Democratic Party, which I agree with Joe, is not the best representation at all of
Well,
liberalism,
what you're
would have
saying
to
is
get
that
better
they need to
too.
change their policies, and why those people who genuinely believe in their policies, why
No,
would
but
they want to change that?
I
With
can
the
paint
state
it
to
in the
get
other
power, to gain
direction.
power.
That actually can more easily be understood from the other direction. So when Democrats are losing, almost losing or lost last time, while winning the popular vote within the electoral college system, me and many other people that I know are calling Democrats to stop calling Trump supporters racist and to stop like demonizing people and othering people, not just because we want to win the votes, but because we actually want to win people over. We want to be able to quote unquote our party to actually try to represent more people, to try to represent everybody, to try to understand them. And I think that is kind of what I understand is implied from the other direction. Is like, oh, if you're losing 5 million by 5 million, 4 to 5 million votes every time, maybe that will incentivize you to try to at least understand why you're losing these votes. Can you connect with these people? Can you find the middle ground instead of just strong arming to your position only? Otherwise, we never get anywhere, and it's like this gridlock of bad compromises and nasty bills and situations that are never going to actually reach more increasing number of people.
Mm-hmm. And I think another thing worth considering is because I'm hoping to run in for state house here in North Carolina again. especially now that the current incumbent, who's actually the oldest member of the Democratic House here in North Carolina, is going to retire. I might actually have an open seat I could pursue. And the issue is this: politics is local, right? So if I'm running, my district would be basically the area of Chapel Hill, around the university. So it's a decently young population, right? But the problem is, like I said, if I wanted to run on things that are, I think, aspire to positive conservatism, because of the national brand of politics, right? A lot of politics is local, but the brands are national. That makes it very difficult for me to take that kind of line. Like, I have to run an airtight campaign in a blue district to get elected, because if I go against like the woke zeitgeist, that could really shoot me in the foot if I'm not careful, right? Now, the reason I bring this up is because that is a spillover effect of the inflexibility that comes with our federation as it has been drafted. That causes brinksmanship at the top, that makes rivalry spill down into the more local level, right? So even like I live in a blue district. I'd like to be a good representative of the party for the whole state of North Carolina, not just my district. But like, it's really hard to do that because people are drawing lines in the sand, starting from the national level, and they're drawing those lines because the ultimate lines in the sand are the state borders. Those are incredibly powerful, and the state borders, they're not moving. They don't necessarily have to move, but if they are too much of an influence on what political decisions can be made at the federal level, it gets us in the kind of system where we are, where it's an all-out war, and there's no sharing of power. I mean, this is why Mitch McConnell let almost nothing that Obama wanted to pass for much of his time, and this is why the Democrats are talking about packing the court. Is because it is now all or nothing, and I think the all or nothing thing is just a necessary consequence of the way the Constitution is written and how it gives power to the Electoral College and the Senate. And the one thing that might have been delaying it getting to this point was the fact that there was another 2/3 of the continent for us to expand into, to add more states, to tip the scales more, but we don't have any more room for that. So, what we have right now is going to be very jealously fought over, and it's going to get increasingly ruthless unless we, think of solutions to the system as it is.
If I may.
Oh, go
Oh,
ahead,
no.
Cyborg.
Nah, man, Chris, go for it, buddy.
What's up? What's up? Gentlemen, what the hell are we talking about right now? Was there a claim? Was there an argument? What are we doing?
The
Abolishing
electoral
the
college.
Electoral College.
Abolishing the Electoral College? Yeah, I don't have a fucking clue. Continue.
So what I was gonna say was, as a tangent, what do we think, if I can shift gears a little bit, about something like ranked voting, online voting? Do we think we'll see changes because of this election and the debacle?
I think that's much more plausible.
Is that something we would support? I mean, we
I
as
don't like
in
online
just your
voting.
opinion.
I don't like
What is
online
ranked
voting
choice
either, but
voting?
I think ranked choice voting is a good idea. I don't trust online voting, if I'm honest.
Paper trail.
Do you do online banking?
I do, but that's just my money.
don't
It's
you-
not like nuclear weapons in like the entire country. Like,
And money and stuff like that is insured. Like, if you can report fraud, then the bank will most of the time give you your money back. But like an election, there's really no insurance for that.
there's no like
What if
third
you
party.
could track your vote? I mean, you could confirm. I mean, one social security number per vote. You can check if that social security number has been used before. You can check if your vote's being counted correctly.
How do I check to make sure that social security numbers aren't being used that don't exist, or are for like?
Fair.
I just think
And we
that
also saw
it's
Russia try to hack our election systems. I don't want them tampering with digital votes.
that's a good point. Yeah,
Doesn't seem significantly more difficult than throwing away ballots.
true.
Yeah, but I'm actually more concerned about a foreign agent doing something like that with the digital voting system than I am about some sort of domestic conspiracy to throw away ballots. I think it's much harder to organize that within because we have ways of watching ourselves, watching our people. Many boards of not the boards of elections require um, members to be bipartisan, right? And so with Russia, there's nothing. They're going to be sneaky from the start, right?
Hmm.
I don't have. I think it's harder to pull off something like that domestically than a foreign agent engaging in some kind of grand espionage.
What do you think the key, cause of the failure in trust is during this election? I mean, there's obviously a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of animosity. Like, is there
Um,
something we can learn from this election that will help eradicate trust issues in future elections?
If the media would learn to report on actual things and then move on, or like, I feel like the media is the bad guy in all of this. Just I, don't- who else can you
I want to
trust?
see like the money. I want to see like the money trail of like Fox and CNN and like Washington Post. I just want to see who's like making money off their like marketing / propaganda every day.
Hmm.
I wonder if like honestly like a government run media outlet would actually be like more reasonable because they wouldn't have to be like for profit or just like a volunteer one or something like a non-profit like a Wikipedia but for media,
I
news
was thinking
journalism.
of a fact checking organization, like multiples of them of different parties, so we
No,
could just
just like a
constantly fact check.
regular just like a regular news outlet. Like Reuters does a great job, I think. I don't know why like CNN and Fox don't want to do that
I mean,
besides
it's
making money.
we're in a weird situation where the news media first
Isn't that what NPR is?
Yeah, that's
kind
what I was thinking. NPR and PBS.
of. I feel like we're in a weird situation where the media first acted like the internet wasn't a big deal, then like got too far behind and decided to report based on tweets, and completely lost the trust of everybody. And
Mm-hmm.
and now I haven't figured out how to get it back. There are things they could do. Like, one of the reasons I stopped consuming any news was because the amount of times that things were uh corrected, but I never knew unless I went looking for it, was just way too high. So like, I would say if I I'm nobody, but if I was in charge of like CNN or MSNBC or Fox, I would have the above the fold of my website just be a list of mistakes I made in the past month, so that there's no news. And like, I can't actually show you the thing that might make me money first until I'm good at not making mistakes. So that, like, one, it shows transparency, and two, it shows that like the lack of it might build some trust. Like, they haven't made any mistakes. They seem to be doing better. I just think that they report on things. They don't even report on things. Like, it's not news. Just most news isn't news anymore. It's not reporting.
It's almost like we need like a specifically IDW news source that everyone could just know is that, and then it's no longer about some sort of span. It's like whoever their journalist would be is like, I went here and this is what I saw, and
I'd
that's
like
it.
to see news that is just pure, like to that point, news that's just pure debates. Like, I don't want one side of the story. I want two people for everything that happens, and I want them to disagree.
Unity 2024, baby, let's go.
You shut your dirty mouth.
Wait, you're not into it?
Tom, all for it.
Well, they give
It's too radical.
themselves.
It's too radical.
They
Jimmy's
give,
not gonna like it.
no, I'm not.
It's like, don't break his heart again, Chris. Don't break his
I'm
heart
very
again.
I'm very like I'm very for radical ideas at local levels. But when you're talking at the federal level and you want to make drastic changes to things that 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 shift how power works, I just think that's an awful idea that's going to have incredibly horrible consequences that we couldn't even imagine. And I don't know why you wouldn't start at the state level.
I did like that our argument earlier, the point that somebody made earlier about the Electoral College, if you get rid of it, then people will, like, it'll force the quote parties to like shape up, kinda, you know.
I think the
There's like a
opposite.
huge host of there's a lot of electoral college reforms you can make without like removing it, that need to be done first. Stuff like getting rid of the all or nothing allocation of votes. There's a handful of those things that need to be fixed first before you did something so large.
Yeah, I still think the
It's
idea
also like
of just
super delegates.
I don't know why they don't do like district voting. Why not do that? It's a way to make it a little more local,
Hmm.
similar to how every state gets at least 2 electoral votes. So I don't know how you would do it if you had a state that had less electoral votes than you have districts. That would be tough.
If you did it by districts, wouldn't it run into the same problem? Because then you'd have a city that's far more
Uh,
populous than
no, because if you look at New York, if you look at New York, that means that of our 27 counties, I think like 23 of them would have gotten at least 1 vote for Trump.
I think there's a potential problem that the electoral districts, like if you're, I guess, for the purpose of choosing electors for the college, could be subject to gerrymandering, and gerrymandering would actually then be in play in every state because some states only have a single house district, right? But then you're
Yeah.
splitting it 3 ways because the minimum is actually 3. You get an electoral vote for every member of Congress your state has, so that's your 2 senators plus how many members of the House your state has. And so, like, I don't think like Wyoming has to worry about gerrymandering because the whole state is a congressional district. Now there's a gerrymandering issue there, and potentially other lawsuits in court over that. I mean, it's almost certain that they're going to make it partisan.
Yeah, you're right.
And so, like, the one urban part, like in Wyoming, that might be an electoral district, is not going to get its maybe blue vote, and then the 2 red ones are red, and then you could imagine a similar thing in California where the rural parts of the state might not actually have rural districts. I mean, it could easily go that way.
How did
Fortunately, I don't
Maine
know if there's
get
a
their
solution.
was it Maine and Nebraska, right? How did they get their situation where they have that like one special electoral vote per like this one district? Do we know? Does anyone know how that happened?
It's hard to say. I don't exactly know.
I mean I think one thing, man, it's tough because the problems Joe pointed out, but like giving the states the power to decide how to do. I thought the states did have the power to do that, but apparently not. If the state could decide how they wanted to do their electoral votes, I think that would be better. So like,
They can impose rules on their elector, right? Like, I mean, obviously they have rules. They can require the elector to vote with the winning candidate of the state.
Hmm.
But I don't know to what extent they can actually enforce that. I think usually the penalty for being a faithless elector is that you would have to pay some sort of fine to the state. But I think your vote would still count. So if you went as an elector, and let's say your state went to Biden, and you're like, Trump all the way, you could do that if you wanted. But I think you'd have to pay, whatever the consequences are. But I think as in the eyes of the Constitution, it would still be a legitimate electoral vote because you're an elector, and everyone else is not.
Hmm.
So that's never really been tested. And here's the thing: we talk about the Electoral College is meant to do this. It wasn't just meant to make sure that the minority is represented, so that like basically that it's guaranteeing that like if something happens, it's with consent of a supermajority, right? It was also meant to be something as like a studious body of individuals who will double check what the will of the voters was. Is like, is this really a person that should be president? And I think if we're being honest, like there should have been at least been some faithless electors. I mean, there were like a token few, but like a decent amount of faithless electors who had reservations about putting somebody like Trump in the White House. Because I mean, Trump, even a very straightforward looking at Trump would make you think this is not a man I want to be my president. And that's something where the Electoral College and electors being electors could have made such a decision. but like historically, they've never really acted in that way. They never really acted as like a check against a potentially misguided or riled up electorate. And if it's not serving that purpose, which is literally half its purpose, in addition to the stuff about representing the flyover states, that suggests that there's something failing, and that maybe we should have a system that's serving its intended goals.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to reforming the Electoral College at all.
I mean, I think there are other ways that it could be. We'd have to get more creative, but I almost feel like if we wanted to make the things like the Electoral College and the Senate not as they are now, like more in the direction that, say, um, what was it? The dissident DJ was his name.
Yeah.
I think ways that could be done is within these bodies, maybe guarantee that certain committee appointments would have to go toward people from certain states. That's one way to maybe still address those concerns a bit, while having the legislature reflect like the actual national trends. So, for example, an agricultural commission, right? I mean, it'd certainly be crazy if the committee there in the Senate or the House were being run by urban states that don't have as much of an agricultural background, but that is in large part what the flyover states are. It's just cornfields as far as you can see, right? As well as many of the southern states. And so, rewriting the rules so that the day to day of Congress, as opposed to the election methods, are more representative of those sorts of things, right? So, like, maybe the if there's a committee on like labor rights, Rust Belt states would be given priority and those sorts of things. So those are things we could do so that votes still count wherever you live, but so that the some of the shot calling is relevant to geography is actually still into the system, right? It's not how the election would work, but I think it doesn't have to be how the election would work if we were to approach it from that angle.
I just don't
And
think the
just
federal government can or should or will ever be popular vote primarily. Like, it has to be a balance between things. Otherwise, I mean, if popular vote is just always a moral good, then China should vote for the world. I mean, it's a silly argument to me. We're the United States of America. We're not America. We're the United States of America. The states are their own thing. They have to
Well,
be.
I had a similar discussion with this about reels. Oh, no, what about with reels? Just like a few days ago about like, well, do you want China voting for everything? I think there's a different issue there, which is like we haven't figured out how to have a unified legal system with China where things like human rights are respected, and we have every reason to think that that's just simply not possible. Like, not even China would agree to that, right? But like, if we assume that problem went away, I'll be honest with you, I don't have a problem living under a common cosmopolitan democracy where there are more populous parts of the country, and maybe my vote isn't always going to say what's going on. Now, I suspect there would be some kind of a federation mechanism in that as well, but I think that the China argument is a bit more obvious when we consider what China is right now, not imagining like what it could have been. Like, let's imagine that the Taiwan part of China, right, the Republic of China, had prevailed over the communists, and we had a democratic state governing the whole of China now. Would that argument seem as scary? For example, I have questions about whether or not it would. Like for example, let's say Japan had the population of China. Would I be scared of political union with the voting bloc of people like Japan? I mean, frankly, no, right? I think could be some administrative issues. I think those could be worked on in good faith. And I think ways it could be done is similar to what I mentioned before, is some of the day-to-day, like who's on what committee, could be prioritized toward or exclusive to certain people or certain representatives depending on where they're from. I think there are ways to work around it while also making the elections somewhat responsive to what the overall public will is. I mean, that'd be one way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, but public will is not a monolith. It's just, I mean, I can give an example. If we had majority rule, it would be very short time before we would definitely have universal health care pretty quickly, like federally funded universal health care, and also legalized abortions funded by that health care. Right? That would happen pretty quickly. Now, if you're a person who not only doesn't like either of those, you're in a situation now where you are obligated to pay for something you consider to be murder, and there's nothing you can do about it legally because you'll just lose. That's just one example of something where people are painted into a corner where they can't do anything about it, and it's not a good way to prevent civil unrest.
I mean, I already have to do that. My taxes have to go toward a war that I might think is unjust, and every death is murder.
You do.
Whether it's the murder of the Americans sent there, that's just. I think that's an inevitability of being in a political system.
But you can participate in a system that is relatively balanced, so that you are in a situation where you can vote, and you might be able to change it. But if you're in the minority in that situation, which the flyover states are, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. There's no vote.
But there's also not really anything I can do against the minority coalition that has the reins of the government, and it's much easier for them to hold on to that amount of power.
I don't agree. I think it's about to shift. It's about to shift pretty dramatically. All the Democrats have to do is calm down the woke rhetoric. I mean, I don't think we're in a situation where that's inevitable, going to last forever. It's never been forever. It's just things go and they.
Well, I think the one thing that will shift it is that Democrats are starting to move into those other states.
Yeah.
And just kind of brute force it, and then also I think eventually the filibuster is going to go away. It's been whittled down progressively, and I think eventually people are just going to get rid of it. I think I would not be surprised if the Democrats manage to take back the Senate in the near future, maybe in 2022 or 2024, if that majority leader just got rid of the filibuster. If they're okay with packing the courts, they'll be okay with getting rid of the filibuster for sure. And so maybe that problem won't be there, but it's like
do you need the Supreme Court to do that?
To do what?
To get rid of the filibuster.
No, the filibuster is part of the rules of the Senate. It's not a law. So there's no statute or constitutional provision that elaborates it. What the Constitution does say is that both houses of Congress are allowed to set their own internal rules for how they do their day-to-day.
Got it. So
the filibuster is actually part of that. It's actually an unintended part of that. The rules of the Senate were not written so that something like a filibuster could happen. It's a technicality that was observed after some time. One senator began to exploit it, and it's like once you've discovered that, everyone's going to use it, right?
Yeah.
And then it has become this whole thing that has defined the Senate. But if you want to be like the originalist, a lot of people say conservatives are with regards to the Constitution, the filibuster is not an originalist take on the Constitution or the idea of the Senate. It just isn't. And I think it's actually one thing that has made the Federation as a system less functional than it might have been. Like the Senate could have been a more high functioning system if not for something like the filibuster.
I think that's a great example of something that's perfectly fine for the Senate to do if you gain the majority. But if you gain the majority in the Senate and the House and you use it to dissolve the Senate because you don't like the fact that every state gets two senators, I don't think that's the same thing. To me, they're fundamentally different.
I think that proposes another question, which is if you gain enough power in the government that you can do that, why would you then need to change the rules?
To hold on to it.
I mean, I guess that's possible, but I suspect if it did get to that point that it could be so easy, you're probably popular enough that it wouldn't be an issue, whatever your coalition is.
Yeah, I can't think of much more un-American and dangerous than dissolving the Senate or the House. Like having just one or the other is just a terrible, terrible idea.
I mean, we would have to rewrite major parts. Like, how are we going to decide how Supreme Court justices are appointed, right?
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of stuff in place for that, and we would no longer have an idea for how much is done. So we would need a very thorough alternative. And right now, all we're getting is no more Senate for the most part, right? Like that's people understand what they don't want. They don't understand what they do want, and you can't go anywhere with that.
I find it very surprising that like the Constitution pretty explicitly set up the federal government to do as little as possible. I mean, it's here. We have it for like national defense. We have it for interstate conflict. And I think you could make an argument that we might have it for things like national health. Like I think that's perfectly understandable, and health insurance might be part of that. But I find it very confusing how many things coming from the left are this top down, let's do it at the federal level, when like to me that's just so un-American. Do it in your state. Show us how it works. Show it that it works. So that like if you can do it in California or Oregon or New York, then other states can say, well, you had the money and we don't, so maybe this isn't possible for us. You have the population and we don't, so maybe it isn't possible for us. I don't know. And maybe it's scalable and maybe it isn't. But you don't start at scale.
I think there may be 2 points to consider there. So I think it's well noted that the federal government was probably designed to be more of a last resource in deciding a public issue, where a local or state government would be a primary resource. Especially because at the time, people had more of an attitude of states being more like separate countries that were in a union. And there is that old saying that, before the Civil War, people didn't say, people said the United States are, and afterward they said the United States is. There's definitely been a change in the concept of the United States as being a really more like we've said before, the federation, as opposed to some sort of unitary nation. Now, I think the game on the ground, as far as like what problems people were trying to solve when we were the first 13 states, was something that was also much more localized and something that was more resolvable, whatever they were bringing forth at the state level. And there wasn't much the federal government would really have to say. What the federal government really had, was focusing its energies was on things like border disputes, with the other Western powers or the Native American tribes, with international trade. So, for example, with the Barbary states in the North Atlantic and the Mediterranean, like 10% of our federal budget for like the first few presidential terms up until Jefferson was spent on tribute to the Barbary states, so they wouldn't kidnap our merchant sailors and sell them into Islamic slavery, which is a thing that they would do unless we were under the protection of those Barbary governments. And then the Marine Corps was basically founded and sent in to defeat them in war and say, you're going to protect us anyway and not make us pay tribute anymore and release our slaves, our Americans that you've taken as slaves. That's actually like what you hear from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Shores of Tripoli is referring to that, right? So that's clearly a federal issue right there.
Yeah, I guess one of the things is like
become more interconnected. So things are more directly relevant to a federal solution, or maybe a state's not well equipped to solving a problem.
I guess I see it as like if there were no federal government, the urban centers would have the power. That's what would happen, right? They have the money, the economy, the people. I mean,
an urban center today is very different than an urban center when their nation was founded, right? So Philadelphia has more connections to New York and Raleigh and Austin and Los Angeles and Seattle than it did to other cities at the time. Things are more interconnected, and when things are hopping across state lines a lot more, at that point, it's a very salient question. It's like maybe this is really just a federal issue, and we should just go straight to that. there's that more like civic minded approach to it, not not taking ideologies into account, just looking at the reality on the ground compared to where we were when we were just 13 states and we didn't have electricity, we didn't have fast travel, we didn't have as much of a population or a centrally important role in global affairs.
Hmm.
All right. Now, if we go more to the maybe a partisan or ideological lens, a lot of people in blue states, recognize that as much as 40% of people in these red states are people who want these things too, right? They would like to have an affordable healthcare plan, but it's not available to them due to the laws in their state. And with the federal system, a good chunk of these flyover states would still be getting something out of it, and it would be something that's not really scalable where they live. But if it were scalable with the infrastructural support of the bluer and more urban states, then it's something that wherever you could move, you would know that you'd have a healthcare plan. It would be more conducive to freedom of movement and the kind of benefits that has for commerce. It's in that way. It's like it's a similar. It's like the healthcare care equivalent to what the interstate was to travel and the benefits it has not only for shipping in the country, but for allowing companies to compete for talented labor. Right? It's like, are you going to move to um, New York or California based on the offer there? It's much easier to make that choice if you can just drive yourself, which the interstate provides. Imagine healthcare adding more grease to that wheel, allowing more individual choice in where you're going to live, right? Where we often look at things as like, what this is the top down, telling the little guy what to do. Rather often, the intrusion of the federal government is giving the individual more freedom to operate as they wish across the United States. The interstate did that. I think a universal healthcare system in some form could offer benefits like that. And some
Yeah, but
people think this is a similar thing.
these are things that as who was, I think it was he left, that he was saying like these are things that happened because the people who wanted to make federal changes appealed to the people who are resistant to it. I just think that's a better way to go about it than the other way around, because I mean when I hear like the idea that majority vote means that it's right, to me that means get with it, pal, you're behind. That's what that sounds like to me. Like if you happen to disagree with the majority, then you just are not with it anymore. You don't get it, and you better catch up. And I don't like that.
No, I understand that completely. I mean, sometimes like the majority can vote for the wrong person. I think we've had examples of elections like that in our own history, and it's one of those things where you don't want to, I think, treat that logic ipso facto. I think any attempt by, let's say, the left, for example, to make that isn't great. But I will echo one thing Cyborg was saying before, which is like if you have and I think Dissonant DJ was saying this too, is if you have a consistent majority, so it's not like some, okay, like an example being like the Nazis and their allied parties, won I think either majority or close to it in the German legislature, right? And that was a very momentary attitude of the German people, right? And then they took advantage of that and made a dictatorship, right? But I think what Cyborg is saying is like when you don't have some moment based on like a very specific moment of heightened tensions, but a general trend of people feeling a certain way and never able to manifest that in policy that they want to do, that you think a democracy would be able to make happen, that there's a sign that there's something wrong in the system, that it's not being responsive to what is broadly popular. And so there does need to be some room for that.
But that's like an example of what I mean by like you will get people to like people who are resistant to that. They will be convinced by your success. So do it where you're able. Don't do it where you need me, because I don't want any part of it. But if you do it where you're able, and I see it, I'm like, man, those people have a good situation going on there. Maybe we should be open to this. Then it starts to work. But I don't think I don't know. I don't think that's a good way. It's the same. Like, do you ever read The Road to Wigan Pier?
I haven't read that, but
it's
like what happens in it?
It's not I mean, it's a fictional it's a fictional description of it's like nonfiction, but it's not a real town. But it's Orwell, who was a socialist. And the whole point of the book is he's a socialist, so he's for socialism. But his point was we don't know how to talk to the people we claim to want to help. They find everything we say disgusting and despicable, and they want no part of it. And because it feels like an outsider trying to tell me what's better for me. When it's like you don't know my daily life. You don't know how much it matters to me to know that I made the money and I didn't get anything from you. You don't know how much that's vital to me being able to do this really fucking hard job that I do. Like in the book, it was miners. That's a big psychological part of being able to do it. And I think it's kind of similar. It's like there's lots of things that I agree I think it would be better for people, but I don't agree that you can make them know that. And
Okay, so I think we're reaching an interesting iteration in the evolution of this conversation, which is like we were going away more so from like the systems or whatever, and it's like, how do we actually communicate with each other right on this? And I think that's actually an excellent point because there are certainly at least a few states where if they wanted to have a public healthcare system in the model of the Scandinavian countries, some of these countries have the population, the tax base, and the economic centers to do just that.
California,
New
New
England
York, and Texas, I think.
Yeah, they could do it. I don't know if Texas would be willing to do it just
No,
yet,
but they could.
Texas could do it, right? They might, and given how the vote seems to be split there lately, they might not be far away enough from doing that if Democrats were successful there. But it's, I mean, and this is the thing that, as I remember learning in my political science education, the state governments are treated as laboratories of democracy. They're a great place to try ideas that you might want to carry to the federal level. And an interesting example of that is Mitt Romney's healthcare plan in Massachusetts that became the model for the Affordable Care Act. Right, so that's really like a glowing example right there. And it is interesting that there are Democrats who want to do it at the federal level, but they have no interest in doing it at the state level. It's like you have poor people without health care in California. Why not just do a California system since it's going to be a while since we have a federal system? And I'll be honest, if I were in California and I were a Democrat, that's what would be on my list.
I think you'd have it. I don't think you're going to have much resistance to it in California.
Yeah, so it's strange. It is strange to me as a Democrat, and if it's strange to me as a Democrat that Californian Democrats aren't pushing it, or like New England Democrats aren't pushing it, right? That it's almost certainly going to be strange to Republicans. It's like, well, why don't you want it in your own country, in your own state, right?
Yeah, Republican states or flyover states are like, I'm not an early adopter. I'm not going to get that new iPhone or whatever the hell it is. I don't want it. But if you go buy it, and like you buy it and it's working for you, and I have you as an example, I might buy it.
Yeah, and there's like a good example of like just in general how people can be this way, going outside of just partisan narratives. Like at my job, when we sign up new clients, we require that they give us an email address to make their profile, because that's just what we do. It's something we can make that specific to them, so they can get regular updates about their case, so that we can know they're kept in the loop. It's a very easy form of standardization, right? This means that there's a handful of people in North Carolina who can't be represented by us. They have the money, they like what we think we can do for them, but they're old world. They don't want to do an email address, and we say, well, it's not possible to sign you up without an email address. Some of them take personal offense to that. Like it's almost as if we set up our firm so that we could exclude them from it. And it's like, why are you doing this? Like there's that resistance and this isn't a liberal or conservative resistance, right? It's just like, why should I have to do your thing, right? And I think you're talking about a similar thing there about how folks in those lower population, more rural states would be reacting to something like a national healthcare system, for example. It's a very human response to things. And
I think the attitude
I
for
think
those states and the people in them is like, it's hard enough as it is. We're barely keeping this thing working. I don't really want to rock this boat. Like any amount of change could just destroy the whole thing. So I'm not going to change. And I
right, and
get
it's
it.
like people don't want to have to worry about doing all this stuff of setting up an email and then learning how to make it work and do the computer when probably 30 years ago they just walked to a lawyer's office or called them and got something set up, right? But like it can there can be friction there, and like what we have to do, I guess, is like we as a firm is our selling point has to be like it might be worth it if you're aware of like the quality of service we provide to folks, right? And that's steadily how we can perhaps expand our market. And we have an idea of needing to do that as a company, right, to win dollars, right, to win market shares. Democrats, if they're being serious, should have some itch to do that to win market shares, right? To win not necessarily dollars, but votes, right? The votes are your dollars in that case, and there's not much of a promotional strategy in that sense, right? Like if you're a company and you really think you have a good product that people should want to like give you their money to buy, you are happy to show the success of your product. Why aren't Democrats willing to do that in America, in places where they do have control of the government, right? I don't know. I don't know why it's been like a decade now of pointing at Denmark and saying, "Look what they have. We should be more like them." That's a legitimate argument, but it would be even better if you could say, "Look what they have, and look what we have."
I mean,
you all want some of it.
I can tell you one thing that I think is I think difficult is that it's hard to have the conversation about public health care because it means drawing a line in the sand for what is and isn't covered, and nobody wants to talk about it. Like nobody wants to say, well, if you get this, you're going to die because we don't cover this. And you have to do that with public health insurance. You have to. You have to have established, understandable. You can't budget it if you don't. So like I think that's a tough conversation.
Healthcare system could be passed is if it didn't cover abortion.
And to your point, Republicans definitely jump on that for partisan reasons and call it like death. That's they jump on it and they say they're just trying. They're gonna this is a death. I forget what they call it.
The death panels.
Yeah, they do that, and it's annoying because it's not helpful to the conversation. They could say what I just said, which is, okay, you want to do this, let's talk about it. We have to figure out what the line is. Because you know what? My constituents want to know if they want private health insurance or not. What things aren't going to be covered by yours.
No, I agree. And I think, I was never happy with the characterization of death panels because it's like, the thing is, there are already death panels of some kind in the government making those kinds of decisions, just not for healthcare. And the reason you're not upset about it is because you don't know about it, or is because it hasn't been called a death panel.
Yeah.
Like the CDC, I'm sure has the equivalent of a death panel where if some kind of major plague, like let's say there's a smallpox outbreak that finally comes up again, they have an area where they're going first and an area where they're going second, and that's effectively a death panel, right? And that's just a what if, but there are death panels for things that aren't what ifs, right? And we can either make our peace with that.
I mean, war, right? Like when you send people into war, there's an acceptable loss. Like you're
right. You send in like okay. I mean, look at the storming the beaches in Normandy, right? The idea was like they're gonna just mow us down, but we're gonna send so many that they can't mow us down in time, and we'll achieve a strategic breakthrough. That's literally the idea behind something like D-Day, and it worked. And if you were some 18-year-old kid who just died in seconds, that sucks, But like that was a death panel. Eisenhower was on a death panel. Omar Bradley was on a death panel.
That's true.
Montgomery was on a death panel.
Yeah,
they were on a death panel.
I don't like that Republicans do that because it's unhelpful to the conversation. They could be critical in a helpful way, but that's not an example of it. I was trying to think of why I had such a severe reaction, and I'm gonna reach out to Dissent and apologize. But the reason I had such a severe reaction is because it feels like the rug getting pulled out from under me. Because I have conversations with I know a lot of very conservative people. I have a lot of friends who are conservative, and their big concern is that that's the secret want. It's like I'm never bending because secretly they want to get rid of us. They secretly just want to destroy our ability to represent ourselves with the Constitution, and to
And
have it
wokeism
said
hasn't
like
helped that.
when it's
No.
said outright, and I get it, like it's not. I wasn't being charitable, and I'm sorry, but like it feels like you're undoing everything about the conversation that might get somebody on the other side.
No, I get it. I get it. I'll give you an example of how I feel a similar way about something like that. It's just, um, like where I think some people are more suspicious of, say, something of a big entity like the federal government, for the very reasons you just mentioned. My instincts are often more toward a big entity like a large corporation, a multinational or something like that. And I always think of them as desiring to become sort of an alternative to the state and have political power and to flex it where they can get away with it. I have concerns that Google is doing something, like that, for
Hmm.
example. So when, a lot of people are like when the fucking Gillette ad happened and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Gillette," my instinct is, why is Gillette trying to be political?
Yeah, I'm
Like,
same.
what are they trying to do, right? That's the concern I have. And like when I talk about being like an OG progressive like Theodore Roosevelt, and like I'm concerned about corporate corruption, how they're going to cheat poor and working people, right? That's the instinct in me that gets triggered. And it's like, I'm sure a lot of folks are just happy Gillette is maybe taking a benign stance on something, right? That's a charitable interpretation of that Gillette commercial, right? But it still triggers that reaction to me, like, what is Gillette's game? Because I know Gillette has a game, right? What is Google's game when they fired James Damore, right? What are they up to and things like that? What are they going to try and do so that when corporations realize they have all the power they want, they'll never let it go? And what are they going to do to people who get in their way? How Orwellian are they going to get with it? Just like someone might get Orwellian by removing the Senate. And so, like, I get it, and it's incumbent on, I think, people to anticipate that, make their case for, like, you are trading something if you get rid of the Senate, and it's not everything about the Senate is bad. I think we should be willing to admit that. And the case is made, like, how are the people who are losing what they get from the Senate still going to get something good from it? Why is it better for them, right? My point being, it's better because I think you'll have a better Republican Party. I think here's the thing: Mitch McConnell is one of the most hated senators by their home state. I'm not just talking by nationwide polls. If you look at assessments of a home state toward their senator, Mitch McConnell is one of the most hated in the country right now and has been for a while. That's strange, right? That is strange. Part of me wonders if he's is he impervious to that, because people feel like they have to support Mitch McConnell, as bad as he is, out of this weird, partisan gamesmanship, right? And that is something that I think might be facilitated by the way the spoils are split in this, the way the federation is written. And so alternatives to make so that there's a good Mitch McConnell on the Republican Party is something that's worth considering, I think. And that needs to be the approach. And I think you're absolutely right. It's like, I'm glad that you're gonna like make good with Dissident DJ, but your reaction isn't altogether irrational, because I don't think the woke left have made it easy to believe that the intentions are, like, I think they're more consistent with your fears the way they've been lately. I think a lot of people calling for the removal of the Electoral College and the Senate might actually abuse the power that creates for them.
It's the same thing with guns. It's like there's a conversation to be had about guns. But like all it takes is one person to make an extreme comment that's clearly based on not knowing anything about guns to just destroy the whole thing. And it's every time it's like, you see, I told you that they were just trying to get, like, that's their ultimate goal. And it makes it impossible to find something that can move the needle at all. Like,
Did you see that CNN video from a few years ago when there was another shooting and like they were like did like a 3D movie graphic of like how an assault rifle operates, and it had the whole round in the chamber. So not just the bullet at the tip, but the casing, they animated as being fired down the barrel and ejected like with the bullet. So the whole thing is going down that. And I remember I was seeing conservatives like reacting to them like, "Oh my god, this is how liberals think guns work. Why should they write our laws?" And it's stuff like that that completely poisons the well. It's like
it's
you don't even
true.
know how a bullet is ejected from a gun.
It's true.
I mean,
If you want to have an
it's
honest
like you're gonna write
conversation
a law.
about guns, you should learn about them. And if you haven't, why should I even consider you? You know, like, why should I even consider what you're saying? You don't even know what it is you want to regulate.
No, exactly. And it's like honestly, you should understand what a type of gun can do, where it's advantageous, where it's not. You know, if you even looked at the history of warfare, it would give some insights on that. Like some people will watch movies like The Patriot with Mel Gibson, and they're like, why did they all stand in a line in the field and just shoot at each other like that? And that's because those quick load muskets were not accurate.
Yeah.
So like a line of soldiers was basically a shotgun, and that's why.
To loop this back to the election, because we got 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
That's very similar, I think, to the way people feel about Trump people making claims about the election. You know, like, why should I consider you? You're making absurd claims. You know, and that's a tough one. That's difficult. Because I get it. And I guess I get the that's really interesting. It's making me rethink some stuff.
Well, I hope Trump's reaction to the election will be kind of an awakening for people who were supportive of him, like especially as this moves forward and the facts bear themselves out that like he clearly does not have much regard for the actual electoral process. Like he's trying to keep his seat, and he's making baseless claims that like I mean he's declaring victory. The states themselves, who the thing is, the states get to administer their own elections, right? So the states themselves haven't really determined an outcome either way, and he was already declaring victory in advance of that.
Yeah, I think that was stupid.
Those are just stupid. It's just like it's a blatant disrespect for the electoral process, and for all the. And we have a lot of measures and checks and balances for making sure that the ballots are done appropriately. And some of the things that's being shared around as evidence, like I mentioned before, of voter fraud is actually footage of people legally doing election work.
Yeah. But
For Trump to capitalize on that like that is one of those things like where we really don't want a situation where a president can look at a legitimate election and call it the other thing when we're the leader of the free world. That is terrible. Like we used to be the country that could actually test and monitor elections or like provide experts on something like that. And look at where we are now. It's an embarrassment.
Yeah, I'm withholding judgment. I mean, I if I say what I think, it's that I think that Biden won a fair election and there's no problems at all. But I'm withholding until whatever comes out comes out. I don't think anything is going to come out, and if nothing comes out, then yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I just hope that when we get to that point, a lot of Trump supporters, and I mean supporters rather than just voters, will learn something from that, and maybe not be on the Donald with their AR-15 cocked and ready over something like this. I hope they'll maybe think, I was about to act very recklessly over something that I really had no room believing. There needs to be some introspection on that.
Yeah, I'm pretty surprised by a lot of I didn't think there was going to be this kind of a extreme response on this side.
I was expecting an extreme response. I was expecting from either side. I mean, if I think there'd be some neighborhoods burning right now if Trump were declared the winner. If he were actually
Yeah,
declared the winner.
yeah, I agree. I didn't really think that Trump losing would be that big. I just think that they would be mad and claim that it was, just constantly claiming that it was rigged. But some of the stuff on that new Donald thing is pretty concerning.
Yeah, I think there's been an element of the right wing that's been ready to like spring into action and do something. I think we saw elements of it.
I don't know if it's even right wing
during-
or if it's just people trying to use a situation. I mean, maybe it is. I
well,
don't
it's
know.
some people somewhere in the universe of the right. I don't think it's useful to talk about
Yeah,
the
probably.
right as a monolith. Not every feather on the wing is the same feather, right? But they exist somewhere in that space, right? Just like there are certain people that exist in IDW space versus not in other places. And so I think an example of that we saw, the kind of especially people with that kind of prepper mentality, was in 2014 when the Bundy family raided that federal building because they wanted grazing rights for that federal grassland for their cattle, right?
Yeah.
And the amount of support they got from armed persons from across the country was interesting. And there have been,
That
there
part,
are elements of that
yeah.
in every state. And I suspect that they've been a growing community. I think they're not just merely a rural kind of weird fringe community anymore, like like a cattle farmer would be. I think they've gained broader appeal into more suburban and even urban areas of the country in recent years.
What
With,
I've
I guess you
seen
could
of
say
the
the right has developed.
what I've seen of the preppers recently is actually actively saying, if Biden wins, it's not the end of the world. And they're more saying they believe this, that there will be like massive food shortages over this winter, which I think could potentially actually happen. The price of food, like so just be like, it doesn't really, I think the message I've been receiving in the things that I've been seeing is from the preppers is this isn't the problem. The actual problem's coming. And I hope you've got
Well,
enough
I think
stuff.
I think there's an element of that too. So like that, I think that's separate from like the whole like what they're ready to react to versus like whether or not there's a problem coming. There's a guy actually named B.J. Campbell who wrote a pretty interesting piece on Medium about it, explaining like from like a mathematical point of view, he determines that the preppers are somewhat rational. I'll have to link you to it afterward.
I mean, I gotta say, like, if they shut down again, these restaurants are never opening ever again. And like, think of the effect that has on the food supply. Like, how much money comes from restaurants buying food, like massive amounts of food, and what effect that has on the cost of food for the average person, and how much food is needed to be made. So they got to make less food, but they got to make as much money. I don't think we're gonna have a great winter, especially if there's another lockdown. Which isn't to say I'm like totally anti lockdown. I don't think it's a good idea right now. I think that another lockdown is just not gonna be a good idea, especially if it's federal. But
Yeah,
we
I'm
will
worried about
see.
that as well. And that's another thing too is a lot of the tension is a consequence of the pandemic and the lockdowns that there have been.
Yeah.
And those things could always, I mean, that could always be the thing that what was already a very partisan and distrusted electoral process is being compounded by that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why anybody would think that the results of this election would be accepted and unfortunately, like that's not a good thing. I'm not happy about it, but like unprecedented distrust in the media, a horrible year for like with COVID and people dying, and then with lockdown and people in a really terrible mental state, and then riots and protests all summer, and concerns about policing, both in terms of concerns about the policing and concerns about police just not doing the job anymore. I don't think people are really in a great mental state to handle this election. So like that's what I mean by I think in a way this might actually be the perfect result.
No, I think you're largely right. I didn't expect this election to be something I would feel too comfortable about. I thought
Me neither.
There'd be a blowout victory by Joe Biden, which would just redeem like the toxic egos of people in the Democratic Party, which I did not want to happen. Right? Like I don't obviously I'm a Democrat. I don't want the Republicans to win. I mostly bubbled in Democrats on my ballot, but I left the presidential race blank for a reason, because like I did not want to reward the party and the DNC for the direction it's gone. But I also was like thinking like things could be pretty fucked if Trump and the Republicans win again. A narrow Democratic victory might be enough to reverse some of the things about Trump that are bad, as well as to maybe teach the Democrats not to be complacent. And not only a narrow Democratic victory, but the manner in which it was narrow, where Trump was flipping parts of the demographics that traditionally vote for Democrats, right? Not a lot, but in a narrow race, making strides among Black women, among Latinos, is a big deal.
Mhm.
And if Democrats hadn't done better with white men, you might be looking at a Trump who was reelected in large part due to the support of minorities. This is supposed to be the anti-minority president.
Yeah. It's
And so and that's around the curve for the Democrats in future elections.
Yeah. I don't think either party's in a bad situation right now. I think Democrats have been like me, I wanted the Democratic Party to just fall. Like I just wanted a new left-wing party. I don't want no left-wing party. I just want a better one. And I don't think they can do it. But I think they've been handed a situation where actually they've been given another shot. Like they've been given another shot.
I agree, and I'm really hoping they don't fuck it up.
I think they will. I think they're going to do the right thing now because also, luckily, they can't act like the Republicans are in a bad spot because they're not. I don't think the Republicans are in a bad spot. I think that like Donald Trump now is a useful idiot because he can say things that people want said and be the personality that he is, which makes people feel like it's getting out there, and then you can have other people just being like, "Whoa!" But you know what? Like it's a lot better for Republicans to have somebody say like, "Well, that's a little too far," but he said this, and he's not wrong about that. I think that's a really powerful tool for the Republicans.
Like I've been saying, we want our presidents to at least think things like when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Because
yeah, right.
None of us want to be looted, right?
Yeah.
It's not that crazy for the keeper of law and order to say that.
No, it's not. It's not. As much as it might not be like very presidential thing to say,
we want them to think it.
Yeah, you at least want that to be on the mind of somebody in charge. Like, yeah, absolutely. Well, that was 2 hours. I'm gonna go apologize. We are gonna meet up again tomorrow to further discuss.
Unmute myself, Jimmy. I thought this was like a night-long thing. What the fuck?
No, it's not. It's
son of a bitch.
No, it's 2 hours.
Fucking wasted my time. I swear to. I was gonna rant and it was gonna be awesome, but no.
You can rant right now.
Chill.
You can rant right now.
This guy, I agree with a lot of things he's saying. Like, yeah, I'm a Democrat and I'm really fucking pissed. And God fucking damn it, why was this fucking zombie in office? Oh wait, that's right. Fuck me too, I guess. All right, I'm just gonna go play some Overwatch. And all right, thanks, guys. Fuckers. At least I got in this Discord.
Cool. I'm sorry that you couldn't be more outraged.
Well, I was waiting patiently. Fuckers.
You're on the wrong server. Like the whole server is supposed to be the opposite. So I was a bad example tonight.
Right.
Well, I'm gonna go make
a stoic, no less. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think they're gonna be minimized.
Yeah.
All right. So is it weekly? What is it?
It is what it is.
No. Like when do you guys broadcast? Is it weekly
There's
or what?
usually something at least every week.
It's kind of like it's
Whatever
not.
the fuck.
Yeah,
An
I mean,
announcement does go out.
we
An
send an
announcement,
announcement
like,
out on
typically
the
goes out.
Discord,
Yeah.
and
All right.
there's
And
a
an
channel
idea,
for ideas. We're gonna do
there's an
like we're doing one tomorrow to finish this up, and hopefully some European people will participate because it'd be interesting to get perspective outside. And then next, I think weekend was the plan. It hasn't been decided yet. I failed, but we're
Gotcha.
gonna do one
Right.
on free speech, specifically around what's happening in France.
I would like to join that one specifically for America and why you're not allowed to say what you want, and if you do, you're fucked. Hey, I
Yeah.
can provide a lot of context around that one. And how dare you? How dare you, Jim?
I like
Hey, so
I like the preacher thing.
yeah, well, I signed up for a Proton Mail account. I'm gonna get a new YouTube account, so you can see my face all you want. But I'd like to keep that to a minimum because you know why I'm doing that? Because people, even if you've done nothing wrong, and even if you prove that you've done nothing wrong, if you have a hate mob after you and you prove that you're not wrong, doesn't matter. Damage is already done. So fuck me too, I guess. So it's consider it just a defense against the dark arts, if you will.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'd love to join in the discussion to tell you all about the South and why I'm moving back up north to nowhere land. Because guess what? All the developers in the world are now able, due to the coronavirus, which is the biggest blessing in fucking disguise. Yeah, I don't have to go to your goddamn office anymore. What up, G?
Where
Idiots.
are you comfortable saying which state you're in now?
Tennessee, yeah, because I'm moving. I'm leaving this one next year. I got to go take care of my sister. She has a disability. My parents can't really take care of her anymore, so that's what I'm going to be doing. But
I'm going to end the stream because you're going into personal stuff.
Oh yeah, whatever. I don't give a shit. People can know that. I don't give a fuck. Eat my ass. What?